Welcome to Working for Women, the Independent Women's Forum podcast, where we are changing the conversation about women and public policy for the better.
Hello, my name is Carrie Lucas, and I'm president of the Independent Women's Forum. Thank you for joining us for this version of the IWF's Working for Women podcast. This month, the Senate has been debating immigration. Senators have introduced different proposals to address facets of our immigration system and national security. Most Americans value what immigrants contribute to our economy, culture, and communities. But our immigration system is in need of reform to be compassionate, but also to work for Americans. Unfortunately, discussions about the best way to improve our immigration system is often distracted by a lack of understanding about what different immigrant communities bring to our country. Now, IWF's senior policy analyst, Patrice Onwuka, who is herself an immigrant, wrote a really outstanding op-ed for the Washington Post this week to debunk some of the stereotypes we've heard about immigrants from certain nations. So, Patrice, we're going to chat today, and I would love to hear about what you expect from the Senate debate. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Carrie.
This essay was compelling because you wove in so much of your personal story. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I was born in a small island, a British island in the Caribbean called Montserrat. It's still a colony, so we're not independent. And it's beautiful. We have black sand beaches. It's fruit standing, growing on the side of the road. And my family, we had a pretty nice middle class lifestyle. Nice home, cars, everything that we could have wanted. But my parents looked, 20 years down the line, and they recognized that there wouldn't be educational opportunities for me or my brother. And really, our career prospects were very limited. I mean, everything is owned by the government, so you're going to have to work for the government in some way. And I really think they wanted more for us. And so they decided to sell everything and apply to come to the United States. And we were accepted. We packed up our entire life and pretty much moved to this country. When I was 3 years old, we had 5 suitcases of clothes, and that was it. And we started over in Boston. It was like cold, cold temperature-wise, cold culturally. We hardly knew anyone. And we left behind pretty much everything and everyone we knew. And it was difficult. I mean, we didn't move to the same kind of neighborhood either. We moved to a poor neighborhood where, gangs were, around every corner. I remember finding our kids found some drug needles in our schoolyard in our neighborhood.
Wow.
So it was like during the drug epidemic. I mean, it was scary. But we worked hard. My parents really pushed education. And today, my brothers and I, we are benefiting from everything that we've gained in this country just because of the sacrifices my parents made. And to this day, they still say that every single sacrifice is worth it.
Well, that really is such an amazing story, and such it's a story that we've heard from the centuries of people who've decided to leave the safety and security of their home country and come here and to make a new life. And it really is inspiring. And now in your piece, you dispel 3 misperceptions that are particularly about Black immigrants or immigrants. So can you kind of share that with us and tell some of those, the real facts?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's 3 things that I wanted to clear up. And it's funny, when this piece went live, some of my family members said, Patrice, thank you for sharing this because people are not saying it. Number one, not all of us come from countries that are war-torn or that are poverty-stricken. I mean, my island, for example, I think the ratio of cars to people is 3 to 1. So we were not coming from a poor background. There are people who do, but we were not. And part of that too is, you leave behind a lot. I think everyone recognizes that coming here is a dream for lots of folks. But there's also, you leave behind family and friends. You leave behind not understanding the culture, the American culture very often, and really starting from scratch. And so I really wanted to make that point clear. Number 2, immigrants, all immigrants really, but particularly from the Caribbean and African countries, they are extremely well educated and also extremely hardworking. I mean, when you look at Ivy League schools, for example, the majority of Black students who attend those schools are coming from Caribbean or African backgrounds. So these are the kids of either immigrants themselves or their first generation or their parents are immigrants. But because there's a strong emphasis on education, you see that Black immigrants are pursuing educational opportunities, degrees, not just bachelor's, but advanced degrees, and then trying to kind of find a foothold in the economy. And you see, based on our labor participation rate, which is like almost 75%, you see that this immigrant group in particular is really hardworking and really contributing economically to our country. And I think the challenge that you'll find, and my husband, who's also an immigrant, he found is sometimes your degrees and your skills and your experience from your homeland is not always recognized here. So that's a challenge for us. And then the third piece is just around assimilation. I think that, it's actually easier for us to assimilate in some ways because language tends not to be a barrier, but also kind of the values of democracy, of valuing individual rights and liberties and freedoms. And coming from countries where sometimes the government is so corrupt that you recognize why a free, fair, democratic process is so important, I think that aligns very well with values in this country. So, as I've heard some rhetoric, very unproductive and unhelpful rhetoric, and I really wanted to clear those pieces up.
Well, it really is. It is helpful, and it is so important, I think, to understand just that when we talk about immigration, that, obviously there's a lot of different parts. Immigration is a complicated issue, and there's lots to balance. But it really is important for Americans to remember, how lucky we are to be here, and that most people who want to come here for all the right reasons, we should sympathize with that. But Patrice, obviously, this is when we think about immigration, Americans are so divided about it. Do you think that the compromise is impossible?
No, it's not impossible. I actually think that what seems like it's division are really just different types of goals and aims that are played off of each other for political reasons, but are actually not. I talk about it in the piece. I mean, most Americans, they overwhelmingly believe that immigrants bring value to our society, and they support that. There's actually been a Gallup polling looks at how the trajectory of whether we should increase or maintain immigration levels, and it's been on kind of an increase over the past few decades. But Americans also want to ensure that our borders are secure. And so sometimes in the news you hear either it's secure borders and border enforcement and immigration enforcement, or it's increasing immigration. And those goals do not have to be in conflict. I think we can have a compassionate system, but also a system that makes sense. And every country in the world has restrictions and limitations on who they allow into their country and for what reasons. And I think it's very fair, for us to have a discussion about what is the right level of immigration, and also to parse out legal immigration versus illegal immigration. And that is where most Americans say absolutely not. And I believe most immigrants will say, yes, we came here legally. We recognize that rule of law is important, and we need to treat legal immigration differently than we treat illegal immigration.
Yeah, that's actually something I've heard quite frequently from new immigrants, is people who made the sacrifice to get here and to kind of follow the rules, and it can be a very costly and time-consuming process. That often those immigrants, those legal immigrants, are very adamant. They're as passionately anti-illegal immigration as anybody else you'll hear, because we recognize, and I think you hit the nail on the head with this idea of really we need to separate in kind of the dialogue are the legitimate reasons for wanting to stop illegal immigration, because that does pose both a national security threat, and thankfully I think it's just unfair. I think it's, as a mom of 5, I'm always saying, you've got to follow the rules, and it frustrates me with the idea that we have a system today that is rewarding folks who are breaking the rules while making it incredibly hard for those who are following the rules, and that just seems patently unfair. But so I think that if we do keep that in mind, that we can kind of come to a consensus. But so I know that this is kind of in real time, that every day the Senate is continuing to kind of work on this issue. But what is the status of immigration reform, and what do you expect from the debate that's ongoing?
Well, so this week, I think we saw a really unique and kind of rare opportunity for the Senate to debate any proposal any senators had and to vote on them. And we've seen 2 pretty prominent proposals fail One of them incorporated kind of the framework that the White House had put forward on immigration. The other was much more narrowly focused and just targeted on dealing with young people who were brought here illegally when they were kids, and so-called dreamers, and kind of the deferred action program from President Obama. So it seems like there's a very strong deadline around March 5th. I'm sure everybody has heard about that. That just deals with one very specific part of the immigration debate, which is those young people, those dreamers, so-called dreamers. But I think what we'll probably see, because there's so much still some division within Congress, is that there'll be a very limited plan that deals with that March 5th deadline of the dreamers, and trying to ensure that, you know, the 1.8 million of those young people are able to stay and are given some sort of path to permanent status here, whether that's citizenship or something less. And then I think the larger debate around immigration will probably be kicked to a future date. And I'm disappointed in that, because I do think this is, from an economic standpoint, companies and businesses want to figure out how do we ensure that they can bring, you know, good, strong workers here to the United States. There are families who have, applied to bring to be reunited with their parents or their siblings, and they're waiting in line legitimately for a chance to come here, and all of that doesn't get addressed. So you will probably see that the Dreamers issue addressed, and you'll probably see something done around border security, perhaps adding some funding to that. But we really need to not just take a piecemeal approach to immigration reform, but actually to really have that overall discussion about how do we ensure, as you rightly said, that people who want to come here illegally can do so and bring value to this country. And also to ensure that we don't incentivize people to come here illegally.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much, Patrice, for bringing us up to speed on the immigration debate, and also for sharing your personal backgrounds. And thank you, our listeners. Be sure to read Patrice's piece, which is available on our website at iwf.org, where all issues are women's issues.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, or stop by iwf.org for similar content.